Today's the day that asylum seekers that have been forced to wait in Mexico will now be allowed to wait in the United States. Newsmax is reporting those seeking asylum will be allowed to wait in the U.S. until their application can be heard, and to begin with only a limited number being allowed in. The report says that the first port of entry to begin the new policy is right in San Ysidro, California. That's San Diego. It'll later be expanded to 2 crossings here in the state of Texas.
Greg, the latest changes to ICE's deportation guidelines were issued on Thursday. They call for giving deportation officers the right to arrest and then deport certain illegal immigrants. The changes come after the initial Biden administration revisions allowed some dangerous felons to stay in the U.S. while awaiting an immigration hearing. Those that can now be deported immediately, according to the new guideline, include members of criminal gangs, high-level felons, national security risk, and border jumpers. Greg?
All right, so I want to bring John Graves in on this. All these news stories, a lot of immigration stories, a lot of things concerning the weather. Your thoughts as we go forward?
Well, if you summarize those two things, it's interesting because they both deal with ICE, one with weather and one with the border. And so both of them are very interesting because the first whole segment of all those stories is the environment and how man stewards well or poorly the environment and how it impacts all of us. It's also stewarding the nation God's given us and how you let people come in to follow the law and reward those who follow the law, not those who don't follow the law. So you're seeing a stewardship theme in everything that's going on. So as believers, we're the ones that are supposed to influence those things.
Okay, so now I have a verse that we'll share at the end of the program that goes exactly to what you're talking about. But we are a nation of laws, aren't we? That's an important distinction with the United States, is it not?
That's right. It's our laws were actually founded. We're the only nation that was founded to worship God, and we're founded, and all of our laws, if you look at them and study them, came out of biblical precepts, out of the biblical guidelines, and so we need to follow those, and we suffer the consequences when we don't, if we go to either extreme. And people do in this political time right now, always listen to what people are saying, and they tend to go off one cliff or the other. And as believers, as Christians, we're the ones that are supposed to steward that and influence that culture to bring it and even let it be blessed. Even if the Scripture's clear, even if we're taken hostage, we're supposed to pray for the peace and the prosperity of the nation we live in. We're the ones that influence it. And too often the church has been a little passive, so we're asking people to wake up and go influence this culture.
John, here in Texas, of course, we've had a pretty interesting week, so to speak. The governor here in Texas has called on the legislature here to look into what happened here, and specifically into ERCOT, the agency that's in charge here. Should there be anything that happens in the near term, or is that more of a long-term thing, you think?
I think it's short-term and near-term. Mike said it best when he said there's still 7 million people in Texas, about 20% of us, including us, that are still boiling our water just to brush our teeth or to wash our hands or do the basic things. And that's going to go on for at least the next week. There's a lot of things that can be done in the short term. We talked about this earlier. We're called as believers to steward the earth. And what they did is because some people exploited it and only gutted the earth and took from the earth that God created, now we've swung to the other pendulum where we're blaming it. I don't know if you saw John Kerry says it's all because of global warming. Well, if you live in Texas, John Kerry, it doesn't feel like global warming it being negative 0 degrees and freezing everywhere.
Yeah, and so, I agree with that.
The narratives are out there, but be careful what you listen to.
Today is the day that the Supreme Court will consider whether or not voter fraud cases from 2020's presidential election can now move forward. The cases from instances that happened in Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Wisconsin. I want to bring in right now Arizona State Representative Mark Finchem. He's a former firefighter and policeman. He's a constitutionalist dedicated to God, endorsed by the Arizona Police Officers Association. Welcome, sir. Welcome back to the program. Thank you for being here.
It's good to see you, gentlemen. How are you today?
Thank you. Are you staying warm in Arizona? I haven't been keeping up with Arizona's weather.
I would be happy to send you some sunshine and warmth if you could use it. I'm not quite sure how I can package it up and get it your way, though.
Well, if you can figure that out, you'll be a very wealthy man. A lot of people would buy it right now. Okay, so the Supreme Court is considering a number of election fraud allegation cases today. What do you think the outcome of that is going to be? I know I'm asking you to speculate.
I'm not a betting man. I would presume that if these are process-oriented cases, which is my understanding they are, they're not substantive, that the court will take its usual attitude and say, look, this is a political matter. It really is up to the legislatures to do their work. Now, at the same time, I think there are some issues that the court owns. So, for example, I know this isn't one of them, but this is just offered by way of example. The court said that they don't have any place in political matters, yet in Arizona, you had a U.S. District Court judge who forced the state of Arizona to allow 2 additional weeks for voter registration, and then turned around and said, we shouldn't be playing in elections. So I don't know. The court's going to do what the court's going to do. We might get something out of it that actually is a cogent argument as to why the state of Pennsylvania should be held accountable for some of their alterations in law done by a different branch. I mean, there's a lot of separation of powers issues that are going on here, and it'll be up to the court to hopefully return to, I don't know, an originalist view of the Constitution that perhaps recognizes separation of powers. That's
Right.
my hope.
Right. Now, that originalist view, that's what was put on the court. The last 3 judges all have originalist views, but yet we don't see anything happening with that. So it'll be interesting to see what's happening. Let me ask you a couple of things concerning Arizona here. Your state of Arizona, what are you doing now? You guys are in session with an upcoming election, just a year or so away. Are you making any changes there?
Well, here's just a little bit. Those are all the bills right now that we are considering. In fact, there's actually 2 pages of bills that we are considering for everything from cleaning up voter rolls to election integrity, voter privacy, access to. In fact, there was one that I think you're going to take great interest in. It's a bill that clarifies for political subdivisions. Your political subdivisions and the legislature has the authority to audit elections. Now, one would think that under our Constitution, both federal and state, and under state statute, that they would recognize that we have plenary authority. That means absolute. But apparently, between the judges and the courts and attorneys, they don't seem to want to recognize that. So that bill was passed out of the Senate in very quickly, as a matter of fact. And it comes on the heels of a failure of one senator to vote for the enforcement of a Senate subpoena or a set of Senate subpoenas, which I've talked about on your show previously a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, you did. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that and being with us. John, I want to bring you in on this because we talked about stewardship you did earlier. I want to give you a verse from the book of Job, chapter 37, verse 6 and 7, amplified. It says this with the weather we've had this week. For he says to the snow, fall on the earth. Likewise, he speaks to the showers and to the downpour of his mighty rains. Listen to verse 7. God seals up, stops, bring to a standstill by severe weather the hand of every man, and now under his seal, their hands are forced to inactivity, so that all men may know what he is doing, his sovereign power, and their subjection to it. God still has everything in control. To me, John, when I see that, I see the fact that we put our trust in green energy or man or governments or anything else, we're in trouble. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I love that verse because that verse basically says God creates and governs everything that's going on in the world, even though we don't understand it in our limited understanding. I love the way the Message translation in the Psalm says that. If God holds his breath, everything ceases to exist. Take it out of the weather and move it to what Representative Finchem and you were just talking about with government. Daniel, the book of Daniel says that God directs the course of world events as it pleases him. Proverbs, he directs the king's heart. I agree with Representative Finchem. Here's what you're going to see. You're going to see not just a populist uprising, you're already seeing that, and I think you're going to see that more than just the U.S. I think you're going to see a Christian uprising of populism where the Christians start going, wait a second, what can we do here? And if Trump did anything, if you have ears to hear, he was a citizen legislature. If the people listening to us now could say, what could I do at my school board, city council, or something else to be a citizen legislature, that could be what makes a difference in our country and our future.